Welcome to True Freedom, a new podcast for you. If you are searching, longing, and you know there is something more that you need in life. I'm your host, Richard Stokes, and our guide for this podcast is Bodhi, Aldridge, transformational leadership coach, author, teacher, and great friend of mine. Each week, we jointly explore a topic or a theme that's likely to matter to you and your life right now. I'll put some questions to Bodhi and he'll share his profound wisdom on that area. The idea is that you can take that wisdom and see how it feels to you. Sit with it, ponder it, live with it, and do something with it. This is our invitation to you, and our offer is to provide a map to this territory called life and some tools for how to best navigate it. We invite you to come and play. We want to hear from you. We want your thoughts and your questions, and more on that as we go into the podcast about how you can get involved in the series as it evolves. One early ask of you, if you like this podcast, please do take the time to rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and hit that subscribe button for future episodes. It's especially important for a new podcast that we can give it that love, as it will ensure that more people get a chance to hear the wisdom that Bodhi's going to share. Now, coming on to this week, we are going to explore relationships and specifically how to cultivate healthy, long-term, committed relationships. As I said, key subjects that have impact on our life every day. So we'll be talking around areas like, so how exactly do commitment in long-term relationship and true freedom actually sit together? Are they oxymorons? Is there a paradox there? How can they work together? And how can we all work on some of those triggers that we know trip us up in our relationships over time? How can we identify those and actually do some work on those so they're less of an issue? And how can we get on the same page as our partner and simply communicate better as a couple? This and many more areas we're going to cover today. But first off, I'd like to say, hey, welcome, Bodhi. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Richard. Great to be here. And I love those introductions. They get me very energized.
Well, that's the idea, just to tee it up a little bit as we move into today. So we're taking on another big subject area that we thought would be interesting and actually really important for everybody, and that really at the heart of our listener target audience. As we talk about, if you're listening to this, you're likely to be married or in a long-term committed relationship, as well as be mortgaged. You may have kids, you may run a business or be very senior in a business. So we think this one's going to be pretty important for people. You work with thousands of leaders around the world, Bodhi, and sometimes that's in a work context. And I suppose this one's slightly out of work context, but does this subject area come up a lot for you anyway?
Yeah, it's a great question. And as you know, on your journey and many other clients, the old model of leadership and business was, leave your feelings at the door, park your personal life and just show up and run your business. And I think, fortunately, what we know is that, all of that influences you as a leader or a business owner. In fact, the actual cost to your business and your leadership decision depends a lot on your home life. And, obviously your health, but particularly around your home life. You think about if you are having relationship challenges, parenting challenges, that impacts your ability to make decisions, to focus, even your time at work or in your business. And so this is a common area for the leaders I work with. And as you say, particularly most of them are in committed relationships, usually to the opposite sex, yet what we're going to talk about isn't based on gender necessarily. And most of them also have children.
Yeah. And so jumping into it, you set that context of, who this was likely to be interesting to. I'm imagining people may be asking this question. So I'm listening to this podcast called the True Freedom Podcast. And we have in episode 1 talked about what we mean by true freedom and how you can attain it. And obviously we're talking about committed relationships. So how do those two dynamics actually work together, this sense of commitment and this sense of freedom? Let's kick off there.
Yeah, and I will circle back to the way relationship operates. As you mentioned in the introduction, as we expand our awareness and our consciousness, as we expand our presence, what we start to meet in life are these places of paradox. And ultimately on the hero's journey, we start to meet the mystery. Mm-hmm. And one of the paradoxes that we meet is this paradox, between commitment and freedom. And for men, particularly working with men, and I've done lots of work with younger men, rites of passage work, work for teenage boys, for young men in their 20s. And this whole area of commitment is a fascinating cultural conversation. Yet if we bring it back to this paradox, so commitment, fundamentally what commitment means is I choose to have no more choice. Mm. So an example of commitment is an aeroplane on the runway at some point is committed to taking off. A mother who's giving birth is absolutely committed. Mm. And in our life, this concept of commitment is fascinating because if you reflect in your own personal life, the difference between sitting on the fence, sort of doing something, or when you made a commitment, when you absolutely made that decision. And that's the territory we're navigating in relation to relationships. But think about other areas. I work with some elite sports people, and they absolutely made a commitment, somewhere in their career, where I'm absolutely committed to this. And again, I choose to have no more choice. And working with entrepreneurs, if you look at entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, inverted commas, every day they wake up committed, to their vision. And so on the one hand, we have this area of commitment. Now, what plays out in relationship is that when we fully commit to relationship, and for most of us, we think it is about the wedding day, or the day we move in together. Mm-hmm. At some level, there is a conversation or an unsaid that I'm committed to this. What happens when you commit to something is that what occurs is, all of the fear flags start coming up. And so again, to use some generalization and to use a husband and wife together. So husband and wife get married, and wife says, I commit to you, for the rest of my life. 3 weeks later, Friday night, he's not home from the pub. He's still there with his mates. It's like, bloody hell, he never did this before we got married. A bit of a fear flag. A month later, Sunday afternoon, the lawn hasn't been mowed. He's sitting on the couch watching the football. It's like, hang on a tick. What happens is all of these fears start to come up. And often because we don't have the communication and relationship skills, which we're going to explore today, they're unsaid, they're not dealt with. We don't know what to do with them. And for a lot of people, these fear flags come up. And eventually what they do is they question their commitment instead of the fears. And this is where resentment builds. Working with couples, most relationships end, because resentment builds up. All that resentment is somewhere between my ears, I have the perfect vision of my wife, of Amala, the perfect Amala. And then I have the current reality. If you loved me, you would X, Y, and Z, but you don't. As soon as I judge that illusionary vision with the current reality, that's how I create resentment. And this resentment builds up, the illusion of who we want our partner to be and the current reality. And eventually people question their commitment and often relationships end. And so the first part of this paradox, is to really look at, what commitment is. The second part, and this is particularly true for men, Most men I work with, Rich, particularly men who are married, if you sit down with them, most of them, a part of them has their bags packed, at the back door, ready to go.
Mm.
They've never energetically fully gone all in.
Right.
Because it's like, well, what if, or the fear flags come up, now it's this, now it's that. I've got my back door, I've got my exit strategy. And that energetically, psychologically, and emotionally, it's such a drain on the relationship, but also on the individual. Because true freedom only lives when you fully commit. I choose to have no more choice. The paradox is you always have choice. You always have choice in life. But energetically, when you're fully committed, what you're saying to your partner is, I am free to choose, and I choose to be here with you. And I choose to be here with you today, this moment. I'm fully in and I'm fully here. And when you unlock that in yourself, the freedom that unlocks, particularly in relationship, and the energetic freedom in the relationship is boundless. It just frees up so much of the unsaid stuff.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's profound. It's hitting me with a lot of truth bombs coming in terms of what I started from was this sort of sense of there's cultural commitment and expectations, i.e. the wedding band, the party, the moving in. That's commitment as we've been taught it. But there's commitment that actually goes on in here, not just pointing to my head, but my heart and my gut. It just, I'm all in with this. That's, as I say, that when you choose to have no more choice in a world of infinite choice, I choose to have no more. I'm here, and just how freeing that can be. And is it just to dive in a little bit? This metaphorical bag at the back door packed that you reference. Men are more likely to have that. Is that a masculine trait? Where does that?
It's a great question, and I know in another podcast we're going to dive deeper into the masculine and feminine energies. And just to give a bit of a meta view, so fundamentally the masculine and feminine energies aren't based on gender, yet most men are more in their masculine and most women are more in their feminine. Just a generalization. These energies run through the universe, and they run through the planet Earth. All of traditional wisdom knows that this energy, these currents of energy, so we have Mother Earth, we have Father Sky, we have the North and South Pole. We're dealing with polarities. There are a few meta polarities in this relative world, and the masculine and feminine are polarities. And fundamentally, the feminine energy, this current of energy in the universe and in us, is everything that flows, everything that moves. And the masculine energy is that which presences the flow. It's like the river and the riverbank. It's the flow and the scaffolding. And that's within us, and it's within relationships. And so the key driver for that feminine flowing energy is connection and love. Connection and love, connection and love. The key driver for the masculine is freedom. And this is where the distortion occurs. On the hero's journey, the driver for men in their masculine is this absolute search for freedom. And for young men, particularly in their 20s, they think freedom is outside of themselves. Freedom is climbing a mountain. Freedom is going to India and meditating. Freedom is all of that, until eventually, again, in the hero's journey, at some point as the masculine develops, they realize that the holy grail they're searching for, which is driven by this desire for freedom, was sitting at the bedside table all along. It's within them. And so I know it's a long answer to your question, but this desire for freedom is so strong in men in their masculine that it distorts their commitment. Whereas the feminine's all about connection and love. It's all about the relationship. So that's why I've experienced and often experienced with my clients this, the metaphorical, the bags are packed. We're not sure where freedom really is.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it's a distorted view of freedom because culturally what we've picked up on, and also what your answer gives me is we step away from some of the stereotyping. Okay, because we can get very it is only men that do that. It's only women that do this. We know it's not as binary as that, but that explanation helps me with that, and we're going to go deeper into those polarities later on. But I think that straight away, the sense that obviously commitment and freedom can and do sit very happily together, even though they may seem like this paradox. You can find that amazing freedom when you fully commit to anything. And obviously in here we're talking about committed relationships.
Exactly. And that's, this journey to true freedom. It is about what am I committed to in my life? We're looking at it in relationship. But if you look at anything that you're committed to, or you're sitting on the fence, because the energy of sitting on the fence, the energy of indecision, isn't freedom; it's suffering. It's that constant will I, won't I, should I, don't, should I, shouldn't I, maybe I will, maybe I won't. If for the listeners who are wondering about developing and cultivating a practice of presence, through mindfulness, through yoga, through whatever teachings, the real accelerator, is when you commit to it. I choose to have no more choice. Now, most of us think that's constraint and restriction, and commitment and discipline are bedfellows. And we can talk about that another time, the discipline and freedom as well.
Okay, sounds like another episode theme that we touch on. Okay, let's keep us moving through in this area in terms of relationships and committed relationships. I talked also up front about, we do recognize that all is not plain sailing, all is not smooth in most relationships. And you'd almost argue that actually, if it all was completely smooth and even, is there enough of the, use the word polarity, is there enough action going on to create that attraction that needs to exist? But and what I'm getting on here is those triggers in life. Why my wife keeps on doing that thing and it really irritates me, and why is it irritating me, and how am I showing up when I feel that level of irritation, and what can I do about that if I choose to? So let's just talk about that, those niggles in a relationship over time.
Exactly. And where they start is, so when we look at relationship, what we know is that one of the most effective things to a healthy relationship is communication. Yet interestingly, Rich, it starts with the communication and relationship you have with yourself. And again, as we've done on a previous episode, when people start to realize every day you're communicating with yourself, 80,000 thoughts a day, most of them are negative. Every day you're relating with yourself, particularly the way you relate with yourself emotionally. So the mastery in healthy relationship is to really be honest, disciplined, committed to the relationship and communication you have with yourself. That's the part you have absolute control over. That's the part you have absolute choice over. And fundamentally, in a relationship, if your commitment is to being the best version of yourself as often as you can, then you're going to reduce the triggers anyway.
Right.
But we'll get to the triggers.
But crucial to start here. Crucial to start there. And I think, and I've know before getting into a lot of this work, it would be a projection on, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that to me? When they know this hits my triggers. I have moved on a little bit from that, but still work in progress, as my wife would attest to. But I think really important to start in that area that I have control over me.
Yeah, exactly. When I work with my clients, when I work with relationships, because as soon as you go, it's about them, you've gone into a level of victim and affect.
Mm.
Something external is making this disturbance internally.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no road, there's no cheese down that tunnel. Yeah. It's not saying you accept inappropriate behavior.
Yeah.
But it's realizing that, if I want to play that game, then I'm always going to be at effect. I'm always going to be at effect of my partner, my kids, the traffic, the government, whatever. And it's just powerless, And again, we can talk more about that. Yeah. So fundamentally, if you realize that it's about how I experience the world, and remember, as we've discussed, inherently the world is meaningless until you give it a meaning. We're filtering and giving meaning to the world through our experience, through our beliefs, through our values, and through the not good enough, as you know, the fundamental belief. So what happens is we're giving meaning to relationship. And often our partners, opposites attract. There's the polarity. There's also the healing and learning that's possible. And so what occurs is that, if I can use your example, D is just being D.
Mm-hmm.
And you're giving meaning to D. And D will have her patterns, have her habits, coming out of her family of origin, coming out of her, behavioral beliefs, etc. And so if D does something, that triggers you're not good enough, you don't value me and love me, how does that feel for you at times?
It can be a range from really painful to slightly irritating. I think it's a real spectrum depending on what it is, when it happens, obviously context. But it's in that generally not a nice feeling, shall we say?
And can you see it's fundamentally about you? Now, we'll get to D. We'll get to D's behavior. But the first place I want to anchor in for all our listeners is it's about you first. This is where mastery comes in to long-term relationships. Amala and I have been together over 40 years. 4 children, 10 grandchildren. I haven't got this mastered yet. I'm a fair way down the track. But if we had Amala on a podcast, you'd hear a different version, I'm sure. The toolkit, which we're giving our clients, is to know it's always about you. And as we discussed in a previous podcast, it's always the not good enough. Every time. Because I'm not feeling loved or valued. If Dee loved me, she would know that I wanted a cup of tea. If Dee valued me, she'd know that she'd keep the kids quiet when I'm on a podcast. All of those little things that trigger us.
I know.
That's right. Because we're filtering the external world. Exactly. And again, this is why your emotions are giving you the information. So first thing is come back to self. The second piece is, and again, for those listeners, I'm not saying that you accept inappropriate behavior. But for most of us in a relationship, leaving the dishwasher dirty or not putting the bin out, whatever it might be, is just behavior. And the first thing is, if you get triggered, you're going to go into the victim, you're going to go into the not good enough. You're going to jump into the drama triangle, and that's going to be a really sticky afternoon or a really sticky week. Because you're going to hold on to that. If you don't have the tools to acknowledge and feel your feelings. The second piece is if you can come to the conversation in a clean way. And you mentioned, and again, for our listeners, there's a difference between context and content. So the content of our world is all of the stuff and all of the doing. Life is content. Going to the beach, taking the kids to school, that's just life. But what gives meaning to your content is your context. And there can be layers of context. And to give you an example, if I'm running a training session for 10 people in a business, and somebody's sitting in the room with a context that this is going to be a waste of time, again, they're going to gather the evidence. It's a belief. Yep, they're going to activate that RAS. Yep, this guy's boring, he's banging on, I've heard it all before. Yep. The person next to them has a context of, I'm going to learn something. We'll have a totally different experience. Yeah, it's like, this guy's interesting. I'll get a few nuggets here. I'll take away exactly the same content. And so if you're in a relationship where the behavior, or the decision-making with your partner, is getting sticky and you're not getting triggered, you're coming to the conversation as the best version of yourself. Not the not good enough, not the victim, not the blame, not the judgment, all of that. Then the key piece, and I know this was the third part of your introduction, the key piece to cultivating healthy long-term relationship, is to know whenever you're bumping heads with anybody about anything, it's because the context isn't aligned. But we try to fix it in the content.
Okay.
Yeah. For example, the kids are screaming, you're doing a podcast, you get irritated. Yeah. Dee's context is, I'm exhausted, I'm trying to put the kids to bed. At the end of the day, just re-record your bloody podcast. Your podcast is, this is important, this is my work. Yep. So the key here, and this is where effective communication comes in, there are layers of context. If you're willing to tell your truth, and I'll talk more about what truth is, all you're doing is getting to the context where you agree and noticing where you disagree and attempting to align the context. And what we're looking for is a win-win or no deal.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, using that example, we have a conversation with Dee and said, look, these podcasts are really important. And she's like, look, the little fella's got an earache. I'm not going to be able to put him to sleep and create a quiet space.
Yeah.
Then you just go, what's the context here? Well, the context, as important as my podcasts are, the reality is my little boy's health and the support of my wife is more important.
Yeah. So higher context. You're moving up
higher context.
Constantly. Yeah.
Exactly. Win-win or no deal. The win-win is, okay, I'll do the podcast another time.
Yeah.
Yep. 2 days later, you've got your most famous client on the Mojo podcast. You've been waiting for 3 years to get this person on. It's going to accelerate it everywhere. The kids are screaming in the background and you're like, oh no. And you go to Dee and say, look, this is what I'm experiencing. And she's like, I get it. I'll just take the kids to my friend's place. We can soothe them there. We can look after them. I'll come back in 2 hours. Win-win or no deal. Yeah, again, that ability to be effective, that ability to communicate, that ability to be flexible. Yeah, and in a committed relationship, when essentially you're committed to supporting each other, and I talk a lot about in relationship, what's the context of the relationship, which again, we can come back to. But can you see how that healthy, effective communication can help create a long-term relationship?
Yeah, and all these things, often those harder conversations are in the moment and in a moment of heightened stress, you might say. So I think having that tool for as you say, de-stressing and being very, you said, honest and truthful, rather than activated and reactive to just be quiet, because that just, instead of going up the context tree, you're just going up the aggravation ladder. And that's probably when you're going to get to a more significant fallout. I would say. So and again, it comes that word that you use quite a lot. It's the choice. I'm going to choose to respond in this situation versus react. And again, only I can choose to how I respond right here, right now.
There's the self-awareness, then the self-regulation, as you say. How am I going to regulate my emotions? How am I going to regulate my thought patterns? And what do I choose here? Now, interestingly, and again, I think we touched on it in the parenting course, whenever you get triggered, whenever you get frustrated, whenever you get annoyed, fundamentally, it's a part of you haven't loved. So our greatest teacher is our committed partner and our children. Because what they're mirroring back for us, a lot of us, it's like, yeah, I love myself. Yeah, I'm in a good way, not in an egoic way. I accept myself and everything. And the kids go, yeah, what about this? Press your buttons, yeah. And our partners do it as well. That's part of their role. If you want to fast track the return to love, if you want to fast track your healing, commit to a relationship. Because every part of you that you haven't accepted and healed and loved is going to be mirrored back until you do.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's how we create this reality. Yeah. This opportunity for healing. You know, the old saying, if life is the school, committed relationships the university. It's like we're going for it. It's
Okay.
like, does that make sense?
No, it does. And what's coming back to me is this sense of, we started off talking about commitment and freedom and the metaphorical bag at the back door. Because if you're not true to yourself and ready to have that level of experience where I'm gonna grow, there might be some hard yards early on, but I'm gonna grow here. I think you're more likely to be hanging on to that bag if you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
When you let that bag go, okay, bring it on. Okay, it's gonna be as it is, but I know this is my truth. This is where I want to go. I maybe didn't expect it to turn out this way. I might not have written it this way, but this is the way it's going.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the questions I often ask couples is, what's the context of your relationship? What's actually brought you together? Yeah. And it's not a question we necessarily reflect on. Yeah. And there's no right answer. Some people, it's like the context is to build a lovely family and have children. For some people, it's to have adventures and experience life. For some people, it's about personal and spiritual growth. Yeah. What I know is if you're clear on the context and aligned on the context and committed to the context as a couple, then whatever comes up in the content, you can go back there and go, hang on, we chose to have an adventurous life.
Yeah.
We committed to that, remember? Now, things can change, yet normally there's an overarching context.
Yeah. And that's what I was coming to, especially, I think most people would recognize this, when you add children into the equation of committed relationship, that's when more change is going to happen. So do you see that almost, is that an important point for these conversations? Is we've been together a long time, or we've been married, and now we've chosen, or we've had children, and things have changed. You used to be all about adventure. Now you're all about, staying at home and shopping on Amazon for certain things that are needed. Where's the adventure gone?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, it's a good point. What I often say to couples, is at the end of the day, for most couples I've worked with, that are committed to their relationship, which most people are at some level, yet some need to step in a bit more. At the end of the day, the ultimate intention is, in our 90s, to be sitting on the front porch in our rocking chair going, we had a good crack. We had a good crack at life. We gave it our best. I did my best to show up as best I could. I did my best to experience life. I did my best as a parent, as a partner. And if that's the overarching context, and obviously there can be more clarity to that, then absolutely you have to navigate different aspects of it. Parenting, there's two things with parenting. One is working with many men around purpose. And so a lot of my clients in their 40s and 50s, this inquiry comes back up, the holy grail, the search for adventure, the search for freedom. The truth is that the biggest context they've already committed to is to support their family. They may be passionate. I'm passionate about surfing. You're passionate about playing drums. But that's not your purpose. You've already made a deal, unconsciously or consciously, that I've got these children. I'm committed to providing an education, a house, I have a relationship with my wife, however you navigate that as far as home care, children, income, that's the highest purpose at that time. The other big tension I find, which we briefly touched on in the parenting podcast, is a lot of parents aren't aligned with the context of parenting. What happens is unconsciously we bring our family of origin parenting styles. And again, because this is in our subconscious, so often what happens is that we, if we've been brought up by an authoritarian parent, then when we're under pressure, we're going to revert to authority. And remember, we touched on the different types of parenting. If we've been brought up by a laissez-faire parent, where there's no boundaries, we're going to revert to that. And so if you're in a relationship where you want to parent as an authoritarian parent and your partner wants to be laissez-faire, that's going to cause conflict. You've got to align on the context.
So honest conversation we're coming back to around around that. Around that.
And the third type, for those listeners that haven't heard, is the collaborative parenting, which is a more contemporary parenting style. But it's a great example of context again, and as you say, context shifting in relationship.
And so is there, we spent a bit of time there talking about the children coming into relationship and obviously parenting. And some of our listeners are probably in that zone now where maybe children are actually moving out of home and it's back to, classic, we're empty nesters again. What's your advice there? Because I know you've been through this yourself. I haven't. I've got quite a way to go before I get to that point. But what happens when, we were all about, as I said, all our purpose is all about, bringing children into the world, keeping them safe and healthy, giving them everything they need. And now, whoop, they've gone. What happens now? Because I just get a sense that is another key inflection point in any committed relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. The two key parts to that. One is, have you kept the juice alive in the relationship? And two is, how much of your identity is wrapped up in your role as a father, as a parent, as a mother, and so if we unpack those, if we go to keeping the juice alive. So again, we're going to do another podcast around the sexual energy of polarity. And how we're attracted to the opposite energy. And so one of the challenges in relationship is what occurs is that often for couples, there's this initial attraction, there's the eros, there's the spark, and that's often what brings couples together. It's like this incredible attraction to the opposite, to the other. And that spark is something that you can cultivate in yourself and cultivate in your relationship. In fact, it's crucial to do it. Yet what happens for a lot of couples is when life gets busy, we get into, marriage, we get into mortgage, we get into kids, we get into our careers, yet we don't spend enough time cultivating that juice.
Right.
And that juice can start to dissipate. And working with long-term relationships, what I see is, if we think about comfort zones, a comfort zone is a place where I know all there is to know. And the only way we get to grow and learn as adults is to keep stepping out of our comfort zone. Keep learning and growing. What I see with some long-term relationships is they've just stayed in a comfort zone. They've lost the juice, lost the spark. They've just become friends, companions. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not like it was when we started. And so this thread, which we're going to talk about in another podcast, is crucial. How do I keep this juice alive? How do I keep this polarity alive? How do I keep this energy alive? Because when the kids leave, it's a time to have so much fun, so much exploration. Particularly if you've navigated the children to have the capabilities and skills start becoming independent, which again is another conversation.
Yeah.
So that's one thread to your question. The other contextual thread, as I mentioned, is a lot of people now, if we do some huge generalizations here, one of the partners has probably given up part of their career to lean more into parenting.
Yep.
And because most of us, without the tools, without the self-awareness, inherently our identity, it's almost based on our resume. It's like I'm a, PR consultant. I'm a, father. I'm a, and essentially what happens is we get caught up thinking who we are is what we do.
Right.
Yeah. And if that occurs, a big part of our identity can be the parent. I'm the parent. I'm the father. I'm the mother. Suddenly that's taken away. And we see this often with people, particularly men, when they retire. My whole self-worth and self-value was tied up in my career. And now I'm just an old guy at the park sitting there.
Yes.
I had a client recently. His father was a very experienced and successful pharmacist. People coming to him all day with questions, and very intelligent man, very relationship driven. The day after he retired, he was literally sitting in the park and no one came up to him. And because his whole identity was wrapped up in him. And so individually in the relationship and in the marriage, so much of our time, our focus is taking the kids to soccer, taking the kids to piano, getting the kids through school, doing the chores, working parents, all of that sort of stuff. Suddenly that space starts to reveal itself. And if we aren't aware that who we are is not what we do, their identity, is not based on our stuff, then that can be a challenge. And instead of the invitation to explore that, really explore for yourself who you are, explore living a purpose-driven life. There can be a big shift in relationship.
Well, I think tremendous. Completely. As I said, that's not my context yet, but I know I've got several friends and quite a few clients who are in or approaching that zone. So I think just those words and just some really practical things we can start to do in terms of who am I? I'm more than, for example, this role, and I'm also more than a parent. I'm a combination of things, and just getting yourself your head around that in preparation for that sort of change seems like a smart thing to do. And as you say,
a great analogy for that is, so if you think about a book, if you think about a page on a book, and there's all this black writing on the page, and then there's this white page, and a lot of people just think who they are is the black writing. They forget to realize that there's this whole white page. It's the difference between being and doing. It's that deeper experience of life, realizing that there's much more than just the writing. So for any of your listeners, it's realizing that often we get caught up in the black writing.
Great analogy. Well, Bodhi, again, another subject we've bitten off, which is huge. We've tried to condense it and make it deliverable within a sort of 45-minute podcast, and hopefully we've managed to do that, and also identified some future themes that I'm sure we'll come back to. So if this resonated with you, please let us know. If you've got more questions around the area of relationships and commitment, let us know, and we can go deeper into those in the future. But Bodhi, amazing. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. I really want to support the listeners to realize it's an inside out job. Relationships come from the inside out. Commit to your own self-awareness and bring the best version of yourself to your relationship, and it will transform.
Beautiful. Thank you, Bodhi.
Thanks, Rich. Fantastic. Thank you.